never starts with a fight. There is no explosive argument, no landmark rupture to reference later. True shifts in influence begin in the quiet spaces, a hesitation as you cross the threshold, a sentence left hanging. A look traded just outside your sightline but caught nonetheless. Discussions don't conclude, they simply curve away. Humor grows muted. Language turns deliberate as if each phrase must pass some unseen checkpoint before it is allowed to exist. At first, it seems accidental. Maybe coincidence, but patterns do not lie, and you have always detected patterns long before others acknowledge them. The atmosphere around you changes, subtle, undeniable. Those who were once expansive now measure their words. Those who thrived on controlling dialogues now hold back or go quiet. And behind doors you weren't meant to notice, your name arises, not in praise, not in blame, but in something more telling than either. They aren't angry. They aren't overtly threatened. They are unnerved because you refuse to react according to script. You aren't scrambling for validation. You aren't performing to prove a point. You listen past the expected point. You speak less than what feels comfortable to them. And when you do speak, it is never reckless. It lands with exactness. That alone disturbs those who rely on clamor, disorder, and emotional leverage to hold sway. Soon the murmurs coalesce into a directive, a warning, really. Not voiced boldly, but passed along in hushed tones, as though saying it aloud might cement a truth they aren't ready to face. Don't engage, not because you are aggressive or unkind, but because you are perceptive, because you see the destination of a conversation before the speakers have even chosen their path, because you understand implications while intentions are still being formed. You aren't playing the same game. Worse for them, you comprehend the rules of theirs. People who depend on manipulation dread one thing above all, clarity, and you carry it without spectacle. You didn't rush to unveil anyone. You simply observed, retained, and allowed time to unfold. That patience was mistaken for passivity until it was. That's when the second layer of the warning surfaced. They're dangerously intelligent, not dangerous in violence or turmoil. Dangerous because you cannot be hurried, flattered, bullied, or misled. Dangerous because you don't need to win every exchange, only to comprehend it fully. Dangerous because once the entire architecture is visible, pretending otherwise becomes untenable. The most disquieting part for them wasn't what you said, it was what you withheld. Because silence in the presence of genuine understanding is never empty. Why? Intelligence unsettles more than power. Power announces itself. It enters with fanfare, demands recognition, compels reaction. It raises its voice, extends its reach, depends on being seen. People know how to respond to power, submit, resist, match it. The patterns are familiar, even the fear it generates has a recognizable shape. Intelligence operates differently. It needs no declaration. That is what makes it so quietly disruptive. It watches, absorbs, while others perform. It doesn't rush because it doesn't have to. While power advances, intelligence steps back, studies the landscape, and waits. This pause is often misread as hesitation. But the error is short-lived. Once realized, discomfort blooms. What truly rattles others is not knowledge alone, but foresight, seeing endings before the scenes have fully played out. It pieces together slight gestures, contradictions, and motives into a coherent picture long before anyone else senses there is a picture. By the time others react, the intelligent mind has already moved into anticipation. That gap between what is happening and what is already understood is where unease takes root. Power can be confronted directly. Intelligence cannot be cornered so easily. You cannot argue with someone who has already traced the logic to its conclusion. You cannot intimidate someone who has calculated the cost of every move before it's made. Attempts at domination falter because intelligence doesn't meet force with force. It redirects it, often invisibly. Here, unease curdles into wariness. People feel seen not in a paranoid way, but in a deeply personal one. They sense their words are being heard beyond surface meaning. Their actions feel noted not literally but mentally. Intelligence remembers sequences, and once a sequence is remembered, repetition becomes revelation. This makes carelessness perilous, and most people are careless far more often than they know. Unlike power, intelligence needs no allies to be effective. It requires no permission. It functions independently, quietly, consistently. That autonomy threatens systems built on hierarchy and compliance. When someone cannot be pressured into alignment, baited into emotion, or confused by contradiction, the usual tools go blunt. The fear, then, is not of attack, but of being understood. Understanding strips away leverage. It dissolves illusion. It renders manipulation visible and posturing pointless. Power may compel obedience, but intelligence removes the need for compulsion entirely. And that is why it disturbs at a deeper level. It doesn't oppose the game. It simply evolves beyond it. When people realize you see the whole board, most move through life one step at a time, focused on what's directly ahead, the next remark, the next reaction, the next slight edge. Their thinking is linear, narrow, reactive. They believe progress is made through quick moves and audible confidence. For a time, this works, especially where haste is confused with capability and noise with authority. But eventually, they sense something different in you. It's faint at first. You don't interrupt. You don't rush to insert your opinion. You don't compete for the spotlight. Instead, you notice how people speak when they want something, how their tone shifts with insecurity, how their logic bends when their position weakens. You observe who talks too much when nervous, who goes still when concealing. These details gather quietly, forming a structure invisible to others. The realization dawns gradually. You aren't reacting to individual moves. You're tracking trajectories while they're focused on seizing the moment. You hear not only what is said, but what must be true for it to be said that way. You sense discrepancies before they become obvious. You recognize recycled tactics disguised as spontaneity. Once the pattern is clear, the rest becomes predictable. This is when discomfort tightens into anxiety. People feel the conversation slipping from their control. Their usual tools, persuasion, emotional appeal, subtle pressure, cease to work. They try to steer, but you're already several steps ahead. They attempt to simplify complexities, only to find you're aware of the consequences they're ignoring. They speak as if things are flexible. You recognize the constraints they cannot escape. What unsettles them most is that you don't reveal this understanding immediately. You don't correct in real time. You don't challenge every flawed assumption. You allow them to continue, watching as they disclose more than intended. In doing so, they begin to sense they are being perceived with a clarity that unsettles, not judged but understood. And understanding is far more hazardous to a curated image than criticism ever could be. As this awareness spreads, behavior changes. Guards go up. Words grow cautious. They test you indirectly, seeking a reaction, a vulnerability. But you offer none. You respond with calm precision. Each reply confirms their suspicion. You are not improvising. You are operating from a wider vantage. Seeing the whole board means you recognize how single choices ripple outward. You understand incentives, unspoken alliances, unvoiced fears. You can predict shifts in allegiance before they're openly acknowledged. You are never truly surprised, only confirmed. This awareness creates a quiet imbalance. People realize that while they're trying to influence you, you are simply assessing them. They sense the dynamic has shifted, even if nothing visible has altered. You haven't claimed authority, yet the space feels different. Conversations grow slower. Words are chosen with care. Tension enters not from conflict, but from the dissolution of the illusion of control. Then panic arrives not as chaos, but as restraint. People stop pushing. They stop engaging directly. They begin cautioning one another. Because once someone sees the whole board, every move becomes accountable. And accountability is what most were never prepared to face. Why they caution each other about you. The warnings emerge softly, within conversations, in careful remarks meant to shield rather than accuse. No one declares them openly because there's nothing concrete to charge you with. You haven't crossed a line. You haven't attacked. Yet something in your presence makes people hold back, and hesitation spreads faster than certainty. When asked what the issue is, answers are vague and direct. What triggers this isn't what you do, but what you don't. You don't rush to explain. You don't overshare. You don't perform vulnerability to earn trust. Your emotions aren't easily decoded. Your motivations aren't transparent. In settings where people use emotional readability as a tool for influence, this restraint is profoundly unsettling. They can't predict you, and without prediction, control slips away. Those who operate through manipulation depend on familiar cues: flattery, insecurity, impatience, the hunger for approval. These cues let them adjust and maintain advantage. With you, those signals never appear. You remain composed, attentive, selective. You listen fully but react sparingly. You respond only when it serves a purpose, and your words are measured. This absence of exploitable behavior forces others into uncertainty. Uncertainty breeds caution. Caution, when shared, becomes warning. People start advising one another to keep talks surface level, to avoid over-revealing, to stay on safe topics. Not because you demand it, but because they sense exposure is possible. Your memory, your pattern recognition, your ability to connect statements across time makes reckless honesty feel risky. Once someone realizes you don't forget inconsistencies, they become acutely conscious of every potential contradiction. What deepens this reaction is that you never threaten exposure. You don't hint at what you know. You don't leverage information for status or compliance. You simply hold it. That restraint is interpreted as strength. People begin to imagine consequences not because you create them, but because they know what could happen if clarity replaced ambiguity. Silence here feels weightier than accusation. As a result, engagement shifts, spontaneity dwindles, humor turns guarded, stories become polished versions, not raw ones. This shift is instinctive at first, then solidifies into shared understanding. Engaging too deeply feels unsafe, not because you are hostile, but because you are attentive in a way that cannot be managed. This is where warnings take shape, passed along as advice. Be careful, watch your words, don't say too much. Each reinforces the idea that you must be handled with caution. The irony is you never asked for this role. It was assigned the moment people realized they could not read you as easily as they read others. The more these cautions circulate, the more your presence alters the environment. People self-censor before you speak. They anticipate your understanding before you demonstrate it. In doing so, they reveal exactly why the warnings exist. They aren't protecting themselves from you. They are protecting themselves from being seen clearly. And so, without confrontation, a boundary forms around you, not one you built, but one others construct from their own uncertainty. They warn each other not to engage deeply because depth demands honesty. And honesty before someone who listens this closely feels like a risk they will not take. The nature of dangerously intelligent. The phrase holds a contradiction that unnerves. Intelligence is usually praised, but labeled dangerous, something deeper is exposed. The danger lies not in aggression, but in precision, in the ability to see clearly, unclouded by emotion, ego, or the need to be liked. This kind of intelligence doesn't rush to judgment, yet it rarely misses the mark. That accuracy is what breeds unease. Being dangerously intelligent means you retain more than facts. You retain context, tone, patterns of behavior that repeat in different costumes. While others rely on impressions that fade, you carry an internal map of interactions. You recall not only what was said, but why it was said and what it sought to achieve. This depth creates continuity where others experience fragments, and continuity leads to insight that cannot be easily dismissed. Another element is your ability to connect seemingly unrelated points. Small details, offhand remarks, minor inconsistencies, shifts in demeanor, these are not dismissed as noise. They are woven together over time. When you finally speak, your words feel disproportionate to the conversation, not because they're excessive, but because they cut through layers others didn't know existed. Here, silence becomes its own form of influence. You don't fill space needlessly. You don't speak to reassure others of your presence. Your restraint creates tension because people are accustomed to constant feedback. When it's absent, they project their own fears into the void. They assume you know more than you've said. Often they're right. This projection amplifies your perceived intelligence beyond what you ever demonstrate. What cements the label is your selectivity. You don't respond to everything. You choose moments that matter. When you speak, it's clear you've weighed implications. There's no need to backtrack because your words were placed deliberately. This consistency builds a reputation quietly. People notice you rarely contradict yourself, overextend, or fall into emotional traps. In a world driven by impulse, that steadiness feels almost unnatural. The danger, from their perspective, lies in the imbalance this creates. They rely on confusion, speed, emotional pressure to gain ground. You slow everything down. You remove urgency. You refuse to be rushed into decisions or reactions. That refusal disrupts strategies built on haste and distraction. Unwittingly, they are forced to confront their own lack of clarity, and that confrontation is deeply uncomfortable. Crucially, this intelligence does not seek dominance. It doesn't need to win every exchange or assert superiority. That absence of overt ambition confuses people further. If you aren't trying to control the room, why does the room feel controlled? If you aren't competing, why do others feel exposed? The answers are unsettling, so they avoid them. Instead, they label the intelligence itself as dangerous, as if the problem lies in the perception, not in what is perceived. As the label circulates, it gains symbolic weight. Dangerously intelligent becomes shorthand for someone who cannot be easily manipulated, who sees through pretense, who remembers and connects. The danger is not what you might do, but what becomes impossible to do around you. Falsehoods don't land cleanly. Performances ring hollow. Games lose their effect. So the phrase persists, not as accusation, but as quiet acknowledgement. It reflects a collective recognition that precision, patience, and clarity redistribute power without ever announcing the shift. Why proof is unnecessary. The compulsion to prove oneself is often mistaken for confidence, but it usually signals its opposite. A need for external validation, a fragility within. You operate from a different place. Your actions aren't designed to impress. Your words aren't shaped to win approval. You move with an internal certainty that doesn't require witnesses. This absence of self-promotion is quietly disarming. In environments where status is claimed through volume and visibility, restraint seems unnatural. People expect declarations of expertise, displays of intent. When those signals don't appear, they don't assume humility, they assume calculation, and they are not entirely wrong. You understand that proving something is unnecessary when it will reveal itself through consistency. You let others speak first, not from lack of ideas, but because you value information over recognition. Every statement someone offers gives insight into how they think, what they want, where they feel insecure. While others rush to establish position, you gather clarity. This patience creates asymmetry. They expose themselves while you remain composed, learning without revealing. There's also the understanding that proof invites challenge. Declarations become targets, claims provoke resistance. By remaining understated, you avoid unnecessary friction. You don't engage in battles that don't matter. You don't correct those not ready to understand. This selectivity is mistaken for indifference. It is actually discipline. Energy spent proving yourself is energy diverted from seeing the situation clearly. When moments arrive that require your input, you don't escalate your tone. You don't dramatize your contribution. You speak plainly, precisely, because the thinking has already been done. The clarity of your words carries its own weight. People notice you don't repeat, over-explain, or retreat. That consistency speaks louder than any persuasion. What truly unsettles others is that you don't seem invested in how you are perceived. You're aware of the room but not governed by it. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't destabilize. This emotional independence removes leverage. Without the ability to reward or punish you through opinion, people lose a common tool of control. Over time, this approach reshapes the dynamic. Others may perform more, trying to fill the space you leave open. They overstate, overcommit, overreact. Against this, your steadiness becomes more pronounced. You don't need to dominate the conversation to influence its direction. You don't need to announce competence for it to be recognized. By refusing to prove anything, you allow reality to do the work. Outcomes, consistency, quiet accuracy build a reputation that cannot be forced. In that calm refusal to perform, people sense something they can't easily name. A confidence that doesn't ask to be believed because it doesn't depend on belief at all. Let them whisper. Let the quiet warnings pass from one person to another as though your presence requires a disclaimer. Those whispers are not hostility, they are recognition. Recognition that you cannot be rushed, confused, or folded into another's agenda. People whisper when they lack authority over a situation, when certainty eludes them, when clarity threatens the structures they depend on. Silence, after all, only gathers around what carries weight. You were never meant to be obvious. Loudness attracts attention, but inevitability commands space without asking. While others announce themselves, you arrive already understood, sometimes too late for comfort. You don't chase relevance because relevance follows consequence, not noise. And consequence is something you've always respected. You understand restraint is not absence. Patience is not passivity. It is preparation disguised as calm. When people hesitate around you, it is not because you intimidate with force, but because you remove their excuses. Contradictions stand out. Performances lose effect. Empty confidence collapses under quiet observation. You don't expose these things aggressively. You simply exist in a way that makes them visible. And visibility to those who rely on illusion feels like threat. So they label you. They assign meaning to your silence, intent to your composure, danger to your clarity. It is easier to name you as something exceptional than to confront what your presence reveals about them. Labels create distance. They allow people to avoid engagement while pretending it's strategy. In truth, it's avoidance dressed as caution. Let them hesitate. Hesitation is the pause that appears when instinct meets awareness, the moment people realize they are no longer operating on autopilot. Your presence forces that pause, not through dominance, but through coherence. You are internally aligned in a way that doesn't fracture under pressure. That alignment is rare, and rarity is often misunderstood before it is respected. You were never meant to explain yourself endlessly. Explanation invites negotiation, and some truths are not negotiable. You live them. You demonstrate through consistency in how you listen, how you choose words, how you refuse to be pulled into chaos. Over time, people either adjust to that standard or move away. Both outcomes are appropriate. Whispers will fade for some, intensify for others. Those who value clarity will approach cautiously at first, then honestly. Those who thrive on confusion will keep their distance, convinced you are something to be managed, not understood. That separation is not loss. It is filtration. Not everyone is meant to engage deeply with someone who sees clearly. You don't need to confront the whispers or correct the narrative. Narratives built on fear collapse on their own. Your role was never to persuade everyone. It was to remain intact, to move through environments without compromising perception or diluting standards. That integrity accomplishes more than arguments ever could. So let the warnings circulate. Let people choose their words with care. Let rooms grow quieter when you speak and stiller when you don't. None of this requires effort from you. It is simply the natural response to someone who cannot be easily influenced, redirected, or controlled. And when they say don't engage, what they are truly admitting is this: You exist outside their reach. Not above them, not against them, beyond their leverage. You were never meant to be loud. You were meant to be inevitable.